Hi everybody, what's going on? This is Bruce with habowskistudio. I want to thank you for joining me for this video today, and it's going to be a little bit longer video than normal. I'm going to try to go fairly in depth on this piece because I think it's a really nice painting, and there's some ideas for some techniques in the painting that I think will be beneficial for everyone out there. And the thing that's going to be a little bit different is I decided to film this painting process after the drawing stage, after I transferred it onto the panel and I have my initial wash on. And I had just started the painting and I just thought, you know what, this would be great for the YouTube channel, so that's when I start filming. So I apologize for that, but the drawing process is really your basic grid method. There's plenty of videos out there on that. You just transfer your photo reference by scale mathematically to your painting support and transfer the information that way. Depending on what I'm painting, this one I didn't use too many small squares. There's pretty much big shapes. It was pretty easy to do, but I just think the process is going to be really interesting for you. I want to thank you for joining me. If you're new to the channel, please, I invite you to subscribe and be sure to hit that bell notification icon to be alerted as to when I post new videos. For everyone else, thank you for continuing to supporting my channel by watching the videos. I invite everyone to hit that like button, spread the message, and share it if you share it with your artist friends if you find it interesting. Okay, let's begin. Okay, I've let this base tone dry, and during that time, I kind of was studying my reference photo here along with the painting. And there's a couple things that I'm going to eliminate from the original reference photo in my final painting. And what that is going to be is, you can see in my reference photo here, there's a shadow cast. And this shadow is actually, that's a recessed door. It goes back probably about 6 to 8 inches. And so the shadow ends on that plane that's facing the light. So it would make more sense if the shadow kind of crept up and then continued onto this door from an object that's out of the scene that we don't know. So I just felt like this shadow doesn't really... Initially I thought it was kind of cool because you had this shadow, and this shadow. But in the end, it doesn't explain itself enough, and that's going away. Also, when I have my reference photos, I tend to crop in an unusual way in my paintings, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I thought I'd go for it in this piece. And the ramp leading up to the door here is a little bit too much out of the scene, causing a weird understanding of what's going on there also. So I am going to take that out of my painting here. I'm going to take out this shadow. I am going to actually extend the ramp over some so you can see the ramp coming up, and I'll put some, they have like little strips on those things sometimes, so when you're walking up you don't slip back. So I'll add those, and that'll explain more what's going on, that, oh, it's a ramp going up to the entryway into this shack thing. So that's my plan today, and so I'll have to, when I go into getting some layers of paint on here, that's when I'll cover up this area here and this area here. So what I'm going to be working on now is creating more of a wider range of values and start getting some layers of paint on in a monochromatic fashion. I'm going to get started mixing up some paint and applying it to the painting. And I'll start refining more of the extremes of light and dark. Okay, here we go. Now I'm just mixing up some dark value of paint with a little a little sienna, black and white, and just going through and creating my darkest darks to really get a sense of the image popping up off the panel. And then I'll go in and create other values. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning, I wasn't thinking of this for my YouTube channel because of the length it would be. So you didn't see me draw in this subject, but I've kind of expressed how to do that in other videos of mine. Excuse me. And it's using the grid method that is very common with artists with enlarging their reference photo that you can see off to the right here. And first, the reference photo is just that, a reference. I'm not super married to it. The main thing I like, if you see, are the pieces of shapes, the tote there with the blue lid, the green one that's upright, and of course the white against the dark, the bibs against the door. So those are some elements that really add to the structure of the painting. And like I was mentioning before, as you can see now, I'm taking out that shadow in the upper left. That was just not making sense. So it's going to be really, really nice. And I'm also going to be changing the door color on the far left there because it's similar green to the door with the bibs. And I do not want to have too much green. I want to have some variety. And I think it'll help break up the composition in an interesting way. Now back to the grid method, it's just your typical, depending on how many elements are in your reference photo. I didn't need too small of a square pattern on this piece because you have some key points you can reference, the edges of the door, the crates, and so on. And then within that, I can freehand other elements. So I didn't have to be too exacting with what was going on. And now I don't always start my paintings with this value study. I go back and forth. Sometimes I jump right in, especially if I'm really super excited about the subject and pretty much have a guaranteed how I want to pursue it. But in this piece, it just seemed like a good idea. And you can't really see it in this video part here, but the reference photo inside the crate is just some random debris that didn't make any sense for the context of narrative of the piece. So that's why you'll see later on me introduce some gear that is common to fishermen, of course, lobster fishermen and so on, here in Maine. And it will add some visual interest in terms of color too that I put there later on. Now I'm hoping to add this to my collection of paintings. I got a few going of some tools and that sort of thing for a concept for a show that I would like to do somewhere, and has to do with work and all things related to kind of the hard-working class of America sort of idea. And as you'll hear me mention later on, I'll go and tell you now, this is a place called Five Islands, Maine. You can Google map it, check it out. It's a very, very interesting place. This road just dead ends into this little fishing village, working harbor. And so much material there, and it has a nice panoramic view of a little harbor with 5 little islands in it, of course, how it gets its name. And I could see when we went there, it wasn't like high summer, but also wasn't the off season, and there's a little bit of parking still there, so that was kind of cool. Maybe it's just not a super popular spot, so I'd like to go there this summer and maybe set up and do some painting there. There's also some nice older homes right along the waterfront that with the little village road winding around that might be quite interesting to do. One thing that was really interesting with this particular composition was that crate with the super vivid blue lid. I just thought that was a nice contrast with all this beat down wood and sort of idea. It allows for some interesting color to go on in a piece. Now you can see I'm just kind of really just going through systematically, putting in some values, and of course they're going to be adjusted over time a little bit, you know, back and forth, back and forth. You're always in a painting, you're constructing, deconstructing. You know, I'm letting the painting speak to me as it progresses, and maybe add a detail that can suggest itself that wasn't there in the reference to add to the narrative. So something to be looking for. All right, now we're going to get back to some conversation about the work, and then I'll get back to voiceover. Okay, I'm now at a point with the painting where I'm far enough along for me with the value, the black and white value painting, and I'm going to start applying colors. There's a few things I did since the last segment here that you just saw, and I want to take the camera off the tripod and show you that. Just little technical things that just took a little bit of time, and I didn't want to bore you with the physical act of doing it. I'll just spend a minute or two explaining what I did. Okay, to start, I added lines in here for the planks of boards that make up the building, the door here, and this door. And it's been overnight. There's just a little bit of a dark paint terp lay-in, so it's dry right now, and that's why I'm going to start applying the color. And I did a little work on this, not a whole lot. Most of the work was spent over here. You can see how I have the slots in the tote now applied, and when I paint the color of the tote, I'll then cover up any pencil lines. What I did was I calculated, I wasn't super following the photo, but I could see there were so many rows of this and that sort of thing. You want to show some structure in the element you're painting, and other elements, sometimes you can get away with fibbing it a bit as long as it looks believable. And this will be enough information to go on. And the slight pencil lines that you can see up close here, I don't know if the camera's picking them up, but I scribed out some lines to know where to put these bits of value. And now when I paint, I can either go back in with this gray tone and cover up those pencil lines and then apply the green. But the green that I'm going to be using here is fairly opaque. So I'm just going to skip that step. If this was a light toned area and I had those pencil lines, yes, I would create another grayscale over those pencil lines. And if I obliterate a little bit of that by accident when I'm painting the color layer, it's no big deal. I'll still be able to see where I need to add that back in. So that's what I got going on. And it took a little bit of time. I just didn't think you wanted to see that part of the process. So now I'm going to get to mixing up some color and painting this. The plan is to keep this, as you can see in the original photo, which I'll show you in a minute. It's a very muted kind of dirty green doors, and then the shingles on the shack here are kind of a dirty, dusty, bluish gray. So that's going to be, and then you got the warm tone of this planking on the wharf, and all those will be subdued tones. The most chromatic elements will be colors I put on these little buoys, and there's bits of strapping on the bibs, and of course I'll add some luminous light in the shadows. Okay. So just here's a little shot of how I'm using my reference photo. Little things I'm not married to. You can see I've adjusted some elements here, and of course the shadow is not there. It's too distracting. So let's get to some color. Now you can see when I'm applying the color, a couple things. You're mixing up a pile on your palette, and you got a pretty good idea of what you want, of course. But you can see how I move around the painting, and I do this because what if you don't mix up enough color on your palette and you need to match later on? If there's any sort of discrepancy, you have the paint moved around in your composition where it is needed, and then you can adjust a new pile if it's slightly off for some reason into the existing paint on the panel. Also gives you a little variety, so not everything's the same super tone, so to speak. And that's how I kind of do it. I don't do it necessarily all the time, but in this case it seemed to lend itself well for the weathered wood aspect to the building, and it's going to facilitate later on getting some textures, as you can see that I just did with the a wadded up paper towel to blot out some paint. Now I take some palette knife, apply the paint, and then break it back down with some brushwork just a little bit. I seem to be getting into that lately a lot with some paintings, and I find it a pretty nice way to get some very interesting textures, and especially when you look up the painting up close, kind of gives a little bit of an abstract feel. So that's kind of nice. Something else I wanted to mention too, the lines in the door, the actual door on the left there, that's kind of grayish right now that I'm working on, the width of the boards were similar to each other in this door I'm working on and the green door. And I chose to widen the planks on the kind of grayish door on the left there to give some interest to the painting and not have everything be the same width. So feel free to take some liberties. You just want to make sure it makes sense for its construction of the object. If you're working in a vein that this painting is, of course, realism. You can't get too wild with something construction-wise that just doesn't make sense. It definitely is a plausible way to make a door. So that's what I chose to do. Now I'm just kind of detailing out the little piece of wood that's been attached with the metal handle to open and close the door. Very ingenuity kind of ways of keeping the door shut on these places. It's just a functional building, keep the gear in, so they don't spend too much time making it look like a magazine cover or anything like that. And that's what I love about these scenes. They're just down to earth and true to life the way people are living. So now just getting some base tones on the bibs, just getting some elements of dimension so I can judge other things later on. They'll be worked on more later. Okay, so now we're getting back to some conversation on the painting, and we'll get back to the voiceover once again. Okay, the painting's coming along. It's, of course, this process, it's a little lengthy, letting some layers dry before I go on to other layers. And I've got the crate going, got some color going on inside the crate with the ropes and the buoys and that sort of thing. Now what I'm going to be working on is this crate over here, and there's still like some pencil lines showing from where I scribed in areas to know where to put the pieces of dark shapes. And now what I'm going to do is cover that up with the green tone of the shadow of the crate. And because the paint is fairly opaque, I shouldn't have to worry about the pencil lines showing through. So I'll zoom in and show you how I'm painting around the shapes. You could, like I could have painted this green and then afterwards kind of scribed in the lines and then go back in and touch up to cover up those lines. But I started out with a gray scale on this piece, so it's a little different. But there's many different ways you can approach painting. So let's zoom in here, and I'll show you how I work on this with a smaller brush. Okay, you can see the lines that I have kind of showing this area where I was painting before. Now I'm going to take the green paint and paint all around this, and I should obliterate it. Just want to show you a little close-up. Okay, for this step I'll be using my expandable maul stick. It's just a tripod leg off a cheap tripod. And I've added a little bit of terps to the paint to facilitate a little better flow. And I'm just going to start filling in the shadow shape. I'm not worried about subtle little variances. Once I get the base darkness on, then I can go in the wet paint and pull out different variations in the plastic crate. And I'll do a little section and see what I think. I compared it to the photo. The photo's obviously not great color. I'm not too concerned with that because now I have enough paint on the painting itself. It becomes its own entity, so to speak. So I'm going to get one little area substantial enough and judge how I feel it's going to look. I want it to be obviously a little artificial looking, the color, because of of course is a bright, not a super bright, but a very colorful crate in comparison to earthy greens, that sort of thing. So, and what I'm using for the green, so I use some permanent green bright Grumbacher that I had in my studio here, and I've tempered that a little with some burnt umber. I love burnt umber for a little bit of a neutralizer in terms of saturation. So I think that's going to look pretty cool. And you see how the greens are going to be different from one another. The door is going to be kind of a muddy green. So I am liking that. And being efficient, and you could just fill in, but I'm more concerned about just filling in around the smaller shapes. And I'll get a little bit bigger brush to fill in the broader areas. So just going through the process. Sometimes, painting, for this style of painting, you want the feeling of energy and such in the painting, and the power in the form. And the reality is, when you paint, sometimes you're just putting paint on. You're just kind of filling in, so to speak. There's other areas and times when you can be more expressive, but you got to be careful. Like up in here, when I start doing the door second layer, that's my chance to play. But in this tight little area, I need a little more control. So this is what I'm going to do, and obviously not going to bore you with all the going around all these shapes, but this is how it would be done. And I am just going to time lapse the rest of this, and then you'll see it completely painted. Okay, so now I have the crate painted, and I'm super happy with it. I'll probably there's a few little hinges I have to put in once this layer dries. I'll do that later. I want to get to building up some of the bibs more, so I'm going to take some cadmium lemon with some white and get the highlights on here to get some activity in that going on, and then it'll start all tying together. And I really think I might push the intensity of this blue a little more just to make it pop. So we'll check that out once I do the bibs. Now this was going to be the area where I wanted to make sure I did some some soft edges to the bibs, because you want to give them that bending quality as they turn into the light, and that'll be a nice contrast to all the structural elements in the piece. So that's what I really worked on, and then of course getting some base tones of the colored straps on the bibs, and I'm really liking how it's turning out so far. Okay, now we're on to another session on the painting. I'm going to be working on the green door today. Did a little bit in the bibs, so I'm not worried too much right now about totally finishing them yet, until I get another layer on the door for more texture. And I'm hoping this will be the final layer of paint. And what I'm going to do first is work on some luminosity in the shadows, and that'll help me gauge the color of the door in sunlight. And that's what we're going to work on now. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just getting a base of a little richer shadow color, and then I'll go back in with some variations in it to subtly pull out reflected lights and that sort of thing once I get the base layer on here. You could, if you wanted to. I didn't in this case, but the shadows were dry. I could have oiled it out and have a little better time applying the paint, but I kind of like the idea of scumbling this layer, even though it's pretty well covered. If I want to, I have choices to leave some of that more grayish green underneath this little more colorful shadow color. So it gives me options. That's the process. I'm just reestablishing some richness. I'm just using a small filbert brush for this. Again, a Robert Simmons Sapphire. Just love how these brushes handle. Highly recommend them. And I'm not getting paid to say that. I just really like them. Okay, so I'm going to do some more in here and get back to you. Okay, it's very subtle, but I have some luminosity going on in the shadows here, a little more colorful, and then just some subtle separations of the boards coming forward just a bit. And now I'm going to mix up some paint to paint the background again of the door in sunlight. Now what I'm doing is a little bit of what I did in the first before in the painting is I'm putting a little, mixed up some paint, I put it on a palette knife, I'm dragging. I'm using the picture for reference, but I'm not looking for an exact copy. I'm getting the feel of the weathered wood and that sort of thing. And as I apply the paint, I'm not concerned right now with covering up those lines of the boards. I can re-establish those after I get this base tone in, but I'm just kind of getting a little rich color on here. And then I'll manipulate it with a brush. And so basically what you're doing is you're building, deconstructing, building, deconstructing. And eventually you can kind of do this with a brush from the get-go, but I like the idea of physically kind of just putting the layers on, taking down the ridges that are super prominent. And as you take it down, don't just wipe it off your palette knife. You can move it around to different parts of the painting that you're, of the area you're working on. And as I get to that edge of that shadow, with a brush, a softer brush, I'll work on defining if I want a little softer edge. So I think I got enough to manipulate with the brush now. Just breaking it down, dragging that paint. Don't get too caught up in one little area when you're doing the breaking down of the paint you just applied with the palette knife. You want to continue dancing around, and as you get the whole area done, you can see if it's enough, not enough texture for you. And also the key is going to be to get it to a point where you like it, and then go on to another area, and then you can come back. And once you get everything done, you'll have some comparisons. And you can see down here, I got in the shadow a little bit. I still have shadow color on my palette, so we're not too worried about that. We'll clean that up. You don't have a ton of control. You just have to do your best to get it on here and give you a sense of texture. So I'm going to continue with the rest of the painting here and get back to you when I've completed this. So you see the paintings also, it's getting a little brighter green, more intense. So we don't want everything equal weather beaten look. So the door will be probably the most weather beaten, along with some of the shingles potentially. So now what I'm doing is I've mixed up some burnt umber, mixed it a little bit with the green of this and some white, And now I'm just adding some hints of the paint worn off in spots to reveal the wood underneath, and some spots of that are going to be a little more intense than others as I apply. And it's a constant applying, breaking down, and experimentation. You know, put it on there with purpose. Don't just slap it on there without thinking about it. Think about where you want some of that potential effect of wood coming through the worn areas over time. It's by the sea. This is actually a place at Five Islands, Maine. So it's right on the water. Gets a brunt of storms, I'm sure, over the years, and just wear and tear. I just love this effect with this palette knife, and a little bit of white randomly mixed into this already kind of light tone of umber, so that I may get the effect of varied mixture within the application process. So I encourage you to experiment with this kind of idea. And one way to not, fear what you're doing is, sometimes I've taken older paintings that have good bones, but just for some reason didn't click with me, so they're sitting around the studio. That's what I'll practice on, different techniques, try to improve. No harm, no foul. If you do improve it, then you can finish the painting that's probably been sitting around in your studio. So think of it like that, rather than commit on something that you've spent some time getting to a certain stage and you don't want to ruin it. So that'll allow you to get your technique down. So I'm going to work on some subtle, there's some smudges in the high areas where it gets rubbed, like the hand holding the door as it shuts. That will be mostly rubbed out. So I'm going to work on some detail of that. Okay, I get some good base tones going on. Now what I'm going to do is just clean up some of the smudges that got into my shadow areas here for edges, and clean that up a bit. And then I'm going to get some, start working on the shingles a little bit over here. Gotta say, it was a lot of fun, doing this palette knife technique for the textures and such. The trick is you just don't want it to get too gimmicky. There's a fine line. I've seen some palette knife painting that is beautiful, and others that are just like over the top with the palette knife technique. And so just, I'm trying to just find a balance. Now I'm just working on the floor of the wharf sort of thing, and you can see that the planking is different widths, and I didn't want it all to be the same, and there is variety in some wharfs in terms of the width of boards, so it's not always going to follow certain perspective type things as it recedes a little bit into the distance. So, and it makes it more interesting to look at. And there's just a few tangent lines right at the corner of that toe a little bit with one of the lines of the boards, but can't have everything perfect. I tried to watch out for that, and it's hard to keep track of everything sometimes. No big deal. All right. Okay, now that I got some more levels going on here in the painting, got another base coat, a secondary coat on the base of the wharf here. I do see that I want to intensify the blue lid of this crate. I want it to pop a little more. So I'm testing some brightness, some saturation of the color. And I mixed up a pile, and now I'm going to work on repainting this whole lid and see how that comes to life. If it ends up, after everything else is completely finished, to be a little too bright, I can always glaze it down. Now I'm going to start some secondary layers on the door over here, starting with the little lock mechanism here. And this will be built on later too when this layer dries. It's kind of a rusty sort of color. And all I'm doing for the dark part is little burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. And then I'll put that in the dark part here. Not worried about going over some elements that I painted before, like the screws, because you can still see them through the paint layer. That's pretty cool. And I changed the color of this door, so I'll intensify that shadow later. Now, to differentiate, I'm going to add a little white to my light tone of burnt sienna here for the bolt part of the lock. Added a little white and yellow to the burnt sienna. Even though I'm going to work on this later when it sets up. Just suggesting some texture a little bit, nothing heavy duty. We'll leave that for now. It's all coming along pretty good. I think I'm going to strengthen the shingle lines again. I painted over them, so I'm going to fix that. Okay, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. The last part of me detailing out the bibs with the detail on the strapping and lettering and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the files were corrupted. I was not able to use them. So we're going to first pan in with the camera here and show you details of the painting, and then I'll describe how techniques you can use to paint small elements of lettering on in a small area. So let's get on to that. Okay, the footage that I'm going to be shooting with is with my new Canon camcorder, Vixia, and the intro was shot with it, and of course this part's going to be shot with it, and I think it shoots pretty good detail information, and let me know what you think in the comments. I'm hoping to obviously be filming my videos from now on with this camera mostly. There might be little parts if I'm out in the countryside, plein air painting or something like that. I might use my Canon L for different other features, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, let's get to the detail of the painting. Okay, here's the completed painting, and the footage that was lost had me emphasizing a little more here and on the bibs. I'm just going to give you a faraway shot first and now go in with the camera. I think this looks, and I have the frame rate set very high on this. I'm hoping it comes out super nice. Let's see what we got. Trying to go slow for you. So you can see here this small lettering. It's very tiny, and sometimes when you have it bending around a form or something like that, it's kind of hard to tell what the letters are. Just try to separate your mind into thinking of shapes, not letters, and that works really well. Here's a little detail of different elements. Let's go over here now. The palette knife comboed with the brush. I just love the look of it up close. I mean, it's just so abstract up close. Now, the biggest change was, of course, in the tote. In the original reference photograph, there was just random papers or something in this tote, and I had to invent some more fisherman type stuff in there. So I got some reference pictures of ropes and that sort of thing, and kind of made up my own kind of composition there, and I think it came up pretty well. Let's zoom in here. How I suggested the ropes. just hints of the braiding, that sort of thing. There's the other tote. I mean, I am really, and a little bit of detail in the shadows. Over here. I'm really glad I extended that out like I mentioned in the beginning of the video and taking out that shadow. It's very distracting. And changing this color of door really helps so you didn't have all this green going on. I think it adds to the composition. And that's what we got for the finished painting. The bibs came out really well too. I like how kind of created some effects there. Pretty nice. Some subtle shifts in temperature and such. Okay, well, this concludes the video, and I'm sorry I've lost the footage on this part here with the bibs, but it happens sometimes. And thanks for joining me for the ride. This one's way longer than usual, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see other ones like this, let me know in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. And compose them, make sure I don't lose any footage next time. All right, take care. See you next time. Bye.